The work session started tonight. This is May 8th, 2017. It's 4:30 p.m. We're going to have a couple presentations, some proclamations, a mayor's award. And number 4, we have a public hearing for consideration of budget amendment number 1 for fiscal year 2016-2017 budget. Steph?
Okay. Eric's going to put up the resolution that you guys will approve next week for the budget amendment. This was also published in the Hawkeye as required on May 4th last week. So we'll just quickly go down the differences from our original FY17 budget and what we need to amend. On the revenue side, we're amending, Waterworks is having a little bit more revenue than what was budgeted, so that's the $600,000 in charges for services. $10 million, that's the bonding that we did in the refinancing we did. So that big $7.1 million bond, we didn't have that in our budget to refund because of course we don't even know we're gonna do it until basically that day. So, and then we did end up bonding a little bit more than we had budgeted. $2.5 million was for the other bond. That was almost $10 million. We only had budgeted 7.5. So, and then we, based on some of other activity within the city, we're increasing our transfers by $870,000. And that's just transferring within different funds. So that makes up the 11.4 million of revenues that we're increasing. On the expenditure side, you can see all the expenditures are listed by function. If, Eric, you want to pull it down just a little bit. Public safety, basically, that includes overtime, first and fire, also police. We've an increase in the U.S. bank building expenses that we hadn't budgeted. Those are the taxes that we're paying. Also, the 3 new officers that we just hired a couple weeks ago, and then they're going to the academy next week, or today, I guess. So that makes up the increase in public safety. Public works, a couple of things, an increase in engineering. We ended up putting a fuel system in that wasn't budgeted for this year. And then the depot expenses that we're incurring. And under general government, they're kind of miscellaneous, $26,500. We got a printer to print out our new IDs, some temporary labor, and some city hall repairs. Makes up that number. And then our debt service, that again, that 500,000, that's to pay off the bond June 1st that we refinanced. So sometimes those go in escrow, they never go in and out of our books. This one didn't though, so we received the bond proceeds and now we'll have to pay out that amount on June 1st, the $7 million. And then there was some increase in fees also because our bondings, both amounts were pretty high this time. So on culture and rec, basically what's causing that increase is it's just a difference in the way we're budgeting for the auditorium. It's not that the auditorium is costing us more, it's just we're putting in all the revenues and all the expenses. Now, in FY18's budget, we did that, so we shouldn't have another amendment for FY18, but in 17, we still were kind of doing that net amount of what's it gonna cost. Well, we really need to have all the revenues in there and all the expenses. So that increased by about 200,000. And then the other ones are just basically our trust expenses. So this is where people have donated money for a certain program, let's say forestry. And so we hold that money in one of our trust funds. And so it's really hard to budget those because year to year, you know, a year before they're going to spend the money to estimate how much they're going to spend. So these is where we go through now and we say, okay, here's what we've spent out of these funds along with any other encumbrances we have. So that's like the swimming pool trust, Little League, the North Gorge Trail. They're just kind of all miscellaneous. And then under the business type, basically we've had the sewer mainline repair that wasn't budgeted. And then a couple of other minor amounts for the $195,000 that we're increasing in business type. And then our transfers of $870,000. Does anybody have any questions on the budget amendment?
I think we're good.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Number 5.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm sorry.
Number 5, consideration of 2017 amendment to urban renewal plan for Burlington Consolidated Urban Renewal Area. Mr. Tisland.
It's just a brief summary that we previously amended the urban renewal plan to add the Apollo High School site into the urban renewal area and into our plan. The plan at that time was designated for demolition. Since we do have a offer to purchase and redevelop the building, we need to amend the plan to state that it is, I guess the plan is to redevelop the building, convert it into residential units. And then I think one consideration was going towards using the property tax, the neighborhood redevelopment property tax abatement for this property, which it's currently not in that downtown property or tax abatement area. It would need to be added in order to consider that use instead of in lieu of TIF funds.
So how are the negotiations coming with this whole project? Can I ask that question now, or shouldn't I?
You can ask that. We had created a development agreement comparable to what, when we did the Manor site, how that sale agreement had gone and the development agreement that was with that into the current terms, essentially selling the building for $100,000. When we initially proposed it, we were doing it as we'd set it out in our request for proposals with a 15-year TIF rebate, and essentially providing a building that was going as is. And I think we had some pieces in there for making our best efforts on assisting them with the asbestos removal. I think we have the ability to help them, at least getting some state funding towards the cleanup on that. It's capped at $25,000.
I believe so. Yeah.
And that's on a dollar for dollar expenditure, well, 50%. If you put in $25,000 on a $50,000 project, the state will pay the other $25,000. Those terms, we haven't had any comments come back, and Jesse could confirm. I haven't heard anything in regards to the Apollo offer with the development agreement that there are any issues with it. Yeah. We did talk to the developer after our meeting. Tim, you had mentioned the idea of tax abatement would be preferable, and we talked with him about the pros and cons of the two different ways. Something that we talked about with him, the TIF rebate on a 15-year rebate would be for about $32 out of the 40-some dollars that are paid on our county levy, or our local levy with the county school and city included. So if you had the development occurring all at once immediately, there would be a larger reimbursement to him up front, or better deal for that on a 15-year basis. We talked with him about if you have a process where his development was going to occur in stages, which is kind of what he is talking about, the tax abatement might be a better deal for him. And that's really was up to him to kind of make a determination on. The TIF rebate would be a fixed 15-year period that would begin immediately. The tax abatement, if we were to amend the district to where he had that more aggressive 10-year abatement schedule into that property, would allow him to do in phases and get that 10-year schedule for each phase of the project. So if it was staggered over 5 or 6 years for the work being done, he would be able to get the full 10-year advantage on each phase, and that would be the full tax abatement, the 40-some dollars levy as opposed to the 32. He's, from our understanding, and we modified the agreement based off of this, would prefer the tax abatement. Given the timing issues, that makes sense to him. So there isn't really a TIF rebate that's going with this. We are looking at, though, this is a TIF project in terms of the ability to allow us to sell the property using TIF favored rules. It gives us a little bit more flexibility in how we dispose of property. That's a long answer to your question.
So right now, it's in his ballpark.
Right now, it's in his ballpark, and everything we've heard is he's happy with, or satisfied with what we're doing. We're moving forward. We have 2 separate hearings that have to be held on this. Is that correct, Eric?
Yeah, I believe so,
Um,
yeah.
One to add the project, and then one for the sale of the property through the development agreement. The first hearing will be adding the project to the urban renewal, which is what we're doing now on this public hearing. And the public hearing on the June 5th meeting would be for the development agreement, including the sale of property for $100,000. With that, we're in that process, that separate piece, we do have that open to other proposals to come in. I think the due date on that is June 1st, if that's a Thursday. I think that's correct. Where we could at that public hearing have competitive proposals come in for the redevelopment of that site. That would be very simple. That'd be the same thing that we did with the Manor property sale.
You know, maybe somebody could explain to me, I wasn't on council, I don't think, when you approved that downtown rebate thing. So how does that work?
The tax abatement for the we have about 100 block area that includes downtown and the South Hill neighborhood. Do you have a picture of that to put up?
I think so, yeah.
This area was approved for enhanced tax abatement. The rest of town has 2 standard options, and it has a 10-year graduated tax abatement that is, do you know the percentages?
80, 70, 60, it rolls down, it equals 440% over 10 years.
Or you can do the 3-year 100% tax abatement. Within this
So the blue outline, there's a few things on this map, but the blue outline is the neighborhood development urban renewal area that this applies to.
So within that area, tax abatement can be requested on a 10-year basis. The first 7 years are 100% abatement, the 8th year is 75, 9th year is 50, and the 10th year is 25%.
Wow.
When that was done, that was, the council had been, well, you were involved with one project in the downtown area where we did I think a 15-year TIF rebate that never actually went through because the project didn't occur.
Yeah, they didn't do it. Yeah.
But the council after that had a discussion about, rather than, their discussion at that point was, no, let's not be picking winners and losers with some of the comments, and let's have a tax abatement program instead,
Okay.
where you have one set policy
Yeah,
that
one
any
policy.
developer could have. There was a discussion at that point whether that should be for downtown area or for citywide. When we looked at this and presented this area at that point, there are a couple of communities that have something comparable to this. Davenport would be one. If you look at their policy, the timeframe, the abatement on that 10-year basis and the percentage by years, this matches that. They do their downtown corridor, or their downtown area, and then they have 2 highway corridors. One that extends north out of the downtown area. I'm not familiar with the other one to be able to suggest where it is, but what they've done is targeted areas that are, that need redeveloped. The other communities that we saw were typically doing that as well. The majority of communities that anyone that had an expanded area or abatement schedule like this were saying, how do we do this in targeted areas where development is not occurring? And we need to do something that's far above what the traditional tax abatement does.
Okay. All right.
Again, even at that time, there was an argument over whether this should be citywide or not. But regardless, when Tim suggested the idea of expanding the downtown area, this would be what's up on the board in red hashed would be the idea of expanding that tax abatement plan to include that area as well. and the developer is certainly willing to do that. We don't have to do the tax abatement, get that in place by June 5th, but we do need to be working on it as we move forward.
Okay, well, thanks for taking the time to explain that to me. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, council.
Everybody else is good? Okay. Number 6 is a public hearing for a consideration of an amendment to ordinance number 3403, an ordinance creating the Arbor Estates PUD. It's going to be the first reading on that one. Mr. Tisdale.
This is a request by Scott Zeiser, developer of the Arbor Estates. This was previously approved for a PUD and preliminary plat last fall and winter, I believe it was, to do a new residential development north of Sunnyside off of Cliff Road. The previous plan, as shown here, I guess he's requesting a few changes to the plan that was approved. Included 14 zero-lot line duplex condo developments where each side of the condo was on its own lot. The 15th lot was a single-family lot that had an outlot on the corner of the cul-de-sac, and the road went to the north property line and dead-ended with a detention pond on the south. So a lot of the changes are based on, or a lot of the amendments to the PUD are based on changes that he's requesting in his development. Like I said, as he got further along in the development stages and laying out the property, doing some more survey work and other things, he's requesting to add 2 additional lots on the east side, lots 15 and 16, to the condo development. That would wrap partly around the cul-de-sac, having lot 17 that was previously an outlot become a buildable single-family lot, expanding the detention area to the south on his property to cover all the required detention, as well as having an outlot to the north property line for future street development with a cul-de-sac at that location. So a couple points within the ordinance that this preliminary plat would have to come back to council as well, but we have to go through the rezoning first to make any changes to the rezoning so that this plat would conform to that. So the changes in the PUD ordinance would be going from 14 to 16 attached units on the eastern and southern border of the development, modifying some of the setbacks to fit within this area, primarily on the front side of the development. It does get tight around the cul-de-sac, so reducing the front yard setback from 30 to 25 or 20, maintaining the 25-foot required rear yard setback for these lots adjacent to other properties, and then for lots 1 through 14, shifting the front and rear yard setback. So typically the front yard setback on the street is 30 feet and the back is 25. His proposal would change the front yard setback to 25 and the rear to 30, so he's still maintaining the same setback distance, but just having more distance in the backyard. The other change is adding the requirement that a tree be placed in the front yard of properties, approximately 1 per every 100 feet. This would be on private property. And finally, the traffic circulation. The developer would maintain a letter of credit or other surety that the outlot connecting to the north or to the north would be installed should the property to the north develop, so that the outlot doesn't remain in limbo if the property to the north develops. Who's responsible? The concern was the adjacent lot owners being responsible for a lot that the developer could have put in at the get-go. So that's one requirement as well, is that some letter of credit or other surety that this road would connect to the north property line should the property to the north develop. The developer also did ask that sidewalks be waived on one side of the street, only required on one side of the street. That's not in the PUD. That wasn't recommended by staff or the planning commission. They both did not recommend that. So if you wanted to add it in, it would be an amendment to the PUD, but based on the recommendation and discussion, it's not currently in the PUD language.
It's going to be my question.
So it would take an amendment to add that waiver of the sidewalk out. But the planning commission, the changes as shown here, did vote 4-0 to recommend approval of the request to the city council.
Okay, you guys good? I'm good with everything, but I'm not good with the amendment on the changing for the sidewalks.
So that, yeah, that would take an additional amendment by council to add that in, so it's not currently in the PUD.
What was his justification for asking for that? Do you know?
Just reduced cost essentially is the big thing.
Yeah, and I talked to him, he talked too about it being a low-traffic area where
Yeah,
he didn't think it was really that necessary. I kind of agree with him.
I can understand that.
I think Cliff Road currently just has sidewalk on one side of the street as well,
Right.
so some of the existing neighborhood based it on as well.
You guys good?
Sure.
Okay. Number 7, consideration of an ordinance rezoning the property locally known as 816 Valley Street from M1 Light Industrial to C3 Central Business District Downtown Mixed Use Zoning District. First reading. Mr. Tiffin.
It's a request to rezone the former Dial Building. The portion on the south side, as you see here in yellow, is currently M1 Light Industrial. There is a portion to the north that is currently C3, a small portion on Jefferson Street, Central Business District. This rezoning would make the entire property, as shown in yellow here, C3 downtown mixed use, which does allow commercial and residential use of the property. M1 does not allow any residential use, so the property could be redeveloped to include residential with this rezoning. The Planning Commission did vote 4-0 to recommend approval based on the planned use of the property to include residential location adjacent to the existing C3 district, which is to the east and north. And the current designation on the future land use map from the comprehensive plan does show this area as downtown mixed use as well. So again, just requesting to rezone to allow better reuse of the property.
You guys good?
Do you know, do they have a plan in mind?
The applicants here, they're looking to do some residential, I think looking at different residential uses on the upper stories, I think at least, but
Okay.
this would allow residential or commercial use in the building.
You good?
Sounds like a good reuse to me.
All right. Next is a consideration of plans and specifications for the demolition of the property located at 715 Shaka Khan Drive, Burlington, Iowa.
This is the former Parkview Care Center located just south of Dankworth Park off of Madison Avenue and Shaka Khan Drive. The city did acquire this over a year ago, I believe. We're looking to abate the asbestos and demolish the building with plans to subdivide into 3 lots for sale as residential, single-family lots. Previously, there was discussion about whether moving forward with Apollo, that's kind of why it's been delayed a little bit. Those were going to be packaged as a demo project if that wasn't going to be redeveloped, but since the development came forward, we proceeded with Impact 7G in developing plans for the asbestos abatement and demolition, and looking to have bids received by June 1st, 2017 here this year, and I think the completion date by the end of this year.
Wasn't somebody looking at this building prior, or am I getting buildings mixed up?
I think there's been some interest, or not interest, but there's been inquiries into the building in the past.
Nothing more than inquiry.
Currently, it's zoned R1, single-family residential. I don't know that this current use could go back into this area, but based on the current zoning, but obviously could be considered for rezoning. Is in a state that has a lot of mold and asbestos and a lot of issues with it. Cost by the Impact 7G shows $391,000. We did have a estimate from a local contractor a year and a half ago, closer to $200,000. So we're gonna kind of see what those bids come in at. Currently, we have over $305,000 in our fund for
Okay.
projects.
That's
So
my question.
Yep.
Okay.
Council, you guys have any other questions?
Good.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have consideration of plan specs for the 2017 Agency Street Widening Project West End.
in the presentation.
Yeah, just this first one here. So you can see the project boundaries out here. Basically what the project entails is reconstructing Agency Road from West Burlington Avenue out to just short of Highway 61. A couple of the things we'll be doing in this, in addition to the reconstruction, that should be noted are the road will be widened from West Burlington Avenue out to just before the railroad tracks where it kind of necks down there, so that won't be an issue anymore. A new traffic signal will be installed to replace that temporary one out by Plaza West, which is pretty well needed. And then we will be replacing or installing a new sidewalk rather on the north side of the road, and we'll actually have a sidewalk crossing across 61 and then down to Walgreens where there's already some existing sidewalks, so we can connect kind of the corridor there. Next, and I guess the last thing that's worth noting here is we'll be installing a new rail crossing near the entrance to Lowe's and the Blood Bank. The existing one has a little bit of wear on it, but we're replacing it to make it a little bit smoother ride there. On the next slide, I have just a quick picture of what the widening will look like. The darker black line on the top and the bottom there is going to be the new road width, so it'll match, you know, everything as you move farther to the east. So you'll have 2 lanes in each direction and then a center turn lane each way. And that's that. The current budget is 1.4 million roughly. We have 2.2 allotted, and that is a RISE program, so it's an 80-20 match. Our portion of that is just under $500,000. But again, if the bids come in less, our match will obviously be less as well. Our tentative schedule, if everything progresses, is a mid-June letting. We'll receive bids at that point. We would start in early July and then wrap up in early November.
So what impact will traffic have in this regard then?
We would have 2 lanes open at all times.
Okay,
So it will be pretty congested in that overlap between when we have the roundabout going and when this is down. Currently, that'll be about a month if the roundabout takes their entire duration, but they're making pretty good progress out there. So hopefully we can get that down to where it's a
yeah,
couple of weeks, hopefully.
good,
The sooner the better.
okay.
My daughter asked me the other day, she said, "Who's the new guy with the cool hair?" I told her, I said, "It's me, it's your dad, you don't recognize me."
She's the first one that said my haircut's cool in the whole office.
I just wish I had hair, but all right. Any other questions for Jesse?
So does Mount Pleasant Street overlap here too, or are we doing that later?
No, Mount Pleasant Street will either be late fall or early next year. The way we're looking at it is it's going to be an overlay, and the current discussions we're having is, do we want to really open up another project in the fall with the, possibility of not getting it done and having everything closed for the winter? So
Yeah.
we're making that call as things progress on it.
Good move. Okay.
Any
You
other
guys good?
questions?
Thank you, Jesse.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you, sir. Okay, next we have consideration of plans and specifications for the 2017 erosion mitigation at corner of North Street and North 4th Street. Come on back down.
So this is a project, we had a rain event last fall where we had some localized flooding. The water went over the berm and we, had some sloughing and quite a bit of material washed down the bluff. Klinger was awarded the consulting position for this design. Initially, we were kind of going in the direction of a retaining wall, but they proposed
a different option that, we were all okay with, and that was the installation of these soil nails. And basically what it is, you can kind of see a depiction there. You have basically a really high-tech chain link fence that you're nailing back into the bluff. And the nails will be embedded in the rock and grouted in, so that the nails will be tied back, and then all this fencing will hold the berm up. So that's the direction we're going for this one. And you can see here, that shaded area down below, you can see where the road goes around. That shaded area is where they're planning on installing this, the soil nails and the matting. And then in addition to the soil nails, there'll be an overflow pipe in addition to the one that's there. So if there's centralized flooding, we'll pick that up and bring it down the bluff without all the sloughing and erosion. So, next, the estimated budget for this. I don't know if you guys were here or remember the initial budget for the retaining wall, but it was somewhere around $750,000.
Yeah, over 700,000, yeah.
Yeah, this we're thinking is 311,000, so,
3 cheers.
yeah. Claire came up with it, so we can't take all the credit. We just kind of steered them that direction when it became an option.
But what does NA mean?
Uh,
I know it means not applicable, but
I don't believe that we had
This
a
wasn't
budget
budgeted.
established for this project. So that's why I don't have much as far as tentative schedule, because it's gonna have to be, a tough call whether we, add this to the budget or figure out a way to get it in there. So I figured
It's-
there'd be
This is
way.
covered out, we have a miscellaneous sewer rehab account,
Oh.
and we did change how much we were gonna move over from sewer into the miscellaneous sewer rehab this year because of this project,
Moving a little bit more this year than.
moving more than what we had planned. But that's the account that we would use for unforeseen projects such as this.
Okay.
But again, this was something that we did not foresee having the kind of erosion that we had last fall occurring.
Any questions on this one? All right, thanks, Gabe.
Thank you.
Jason.
Okay, next we have a consideration of an ordinance amending section 137.08 of chapter 137 Sidewalk Regulations of the City of Burlington Municipal Code. Mr. McGregor.
The change before you is to change the sidewalk code that states that the minimum will be 50 inches. It restates that it'll be 48 inches, and then gives the Director of Public Works, myself, the authority to match existing in the areas. We do have some areas that are 36 inches, so where it makes sense to exist the matching. So it's a fairly minor change. I think we've had this conversation as the reason why. It should be kind of moved back towards 48, so. Any other questions?
Nick, what assurances will we have that contractors will be putting in 48-inch?
Well, we make ourselves very available when people come in and fill out right-of-way permits, that we will go out and help measure to make sure that their sidewalk is compliant with our code and ADA compliance. So we state that very clearly when we meet with them. There is the problem sometimes that people replace sidewalk without getting the proper right-of-way permit. So that is probably the biggest chance that people run the risk of not installing the proper width of sidewalk. It is my opinion that 48 inch is absolute, and so if it's 47 inches, that sidewalk needs to be corrected to 48. But we are going to try and take every measure available to help make sure that the sidewalk is 48 inches wide on the front end. So.
All right. We good? Thank you, sir. Next, we have a motion for preliminary adoption of the second reading of an ordinance vacating and selling a portion of the Spruce Street right-of-way located west of South Main Street and a portion of Valley right-of-way located north of Spruce Street and west of South Main Street, Burlington, Iowa. Mr. Tisland.
No changes from the previous reading. The adjacent property owner, Michael and Sally Campbell, have requested this vacation. They own the property at 223 Angular as well as 629 South Main. Looking to redevelop the property at 629 South Main, and this added space would benefit them. There is no through connection on Spruce Street, and this would maintain access to the property at 213 Spruce Street on the bottom of the map as well for their existing driveway. But this would be combined with the existing properties owned by the Campbells, and the sale price is listed at $3,000.
You guys got any problems with that?
No.
Okay.
Be prepared to waive the third.
Right on. Next, motion for final adoption of an ordinance providing for the division of taxes levied on taxable property in the Deer Point Estates urban renewal area pursuant to section 403.19 of the Code of Iowa.
No changes from previous readings. Again, sets up the ability to use TIF for the Deer Point Estates urban renewal area and Deer Point Estates subdivision. Still have a development agreement that will follow hopefully at the next meeting to set up the parameters for the use of the funds.
Okay, you guys good? All right, next we have a resolution approving the final plat. Leah
Hold on a
Zy-
minute. Nick had information.
Because it was brought up at the last council meeting, I wanted to show kind of a map of the sewer discussion that ensued because the concerns with this development. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to talk about it now, or I can talk about it at the end.
let me wait till the, let me wait till the end. That's groovy with you. Okay, a resolution approving the final plat, Leah Zeiser subdivision.
Leah Zeiser owns property between Weimer and Dane Street, just north of Mount Pleasant Street. The area highlighted in red here with the YMCA being down in the bottom right corner of this map. Looking to subdivide this into 3 separate buildable lots, which is a minor subdivision, goes directly to council. Did the review on this development. There was a couple comments through the development review from the fire department. There's some concerns about the street on the west side. It is a 20-foot right-of-way, approximately 14 to 16-foot wide roadway coming up from Mount Pleasant Street. There is no turnaround at the end of all these fire apparatus turnaround at the end of the streets, including Dane Street and Weimer Street there. It is approximately 1,350 feet long from Mount Pleasant to the last driveway in the north, which exceeds our current requirements of 750 feet, which were not established with this development, but with this new subdivision. They had some concerns about that. New construction would be required to meet current fire code and likely require residential sprinkler systems. The street has no turnarounds. It's very narrow. During a recent house fire on Domeland, a residential street similar to Weimer, there was some difficulty getting equipment to the site due to the narrow scenes, and as well there's some police vehicles that were blocked in. So they wanted to express the concerns based on the size of the existing streets, and just take that into consideration with the consideration of this plat.
You guys have any questions? Okay.
Can we go
Mayor?
back
Yeah. Which one do you want to go back to?
13?
I'm not paying attention to numbers. Yeah,
Let's go back.
your point.
Yeah, let's go.
Well, I kind of want to know where everyone stands, because I have a feeling there's going to be more of a discussion then than there just was. So I kind of want to know where everyone stands, what you've heard, emails you've gotten, articles you've read.
I was going to say basically the same thing. We've gotten, I know that decisions were made based on the information that was presented, and it was information that was at the time good information that was presented by Ryan. I think we found through information that has come since then that information is probably not as credible as we as it was when it was presented. I think the Gruen and Gruen study is flawed. It was done at the peak of the fertilizer plant development. There's 2,500 to 4,000 construction jobs that are no longer in the area. What RECI pointed out was that there were, the Gruen and Gruen said that we would have a net gain of 509 new jobs in the four-county area, a year per year for 10 years, from 2015 to 2025. In 2015 to 2016, we had a net gain of 8. If you read the report, you'd find that the reasoning for the proposal that is being offered for the development that Mr. Nagaraki is wanting to do is not as valid as what you would hope it would be as presented. It's not as presented.
Based on this other company that competes with Gruen, right?
Pardon me?
You're making that basis on this other group and their report that is critical of the primary report that we got.
You're absolutely right, that another developer commissioned that report. And I have no reason to believe that he would ask the company that done that report to falsify that information. All they did was point out that there was actually information that they had that was not available to Gruen and Gruen at the time that they done the study. And that there was some information that was available that was not presented in the same light that they would present it, I guess is the best way to say that. There's, I read it in detail. I'm not out to hurt anybody. If there's anybody in this town that's doing a development that I want to see succeed, it's Ryan Nagaraki. He has presented himself in the utmost professionalism. He's done his research, and he's presented the research as he got it. And there's been new information that's been presented since then, and I think that we need to take that into consideration.
I want to address that because I probably didn't read it as good as you apparently. I didn't go through it with a fine-tooth comb, but I read it, and what I got from the report was that some of the information really didn't apply the way I took it. With the construction workers, because that was a big part of it, with the people that were working on the fertilizer plant, they were renters. I mean, they weren't buying homes. So I mean, to me, you know, that report has nothing to do with the fact that we have people that need homes at this certain price. As far as the renting thing, to me, I didn't even consider that in the equation. As far as the job thing, you know, I was going with the fact that I've had your son barking at, you know, the council for 4 or 5 years saying, hey, I'm trying to find houses within a certain limit to get people in to be doctors, and then with the information that the other study had. And I'm not leaning either way. I think when it comes to a study that there's always going to be variables, but what I was looking at was the fact that the fertilizer's here, the fertilizer's plant's gone. It doesn't really matter if they were renters. We're talking about selling homes to people that were trying to get it to move into Burlington and stay, and I just don't. I think it's apples and oranges as far as I'm concerned on the study. That's just kind of where I'm at. Since everybody brought it up, I don't know where everybody else is. Are we in?
Well, you know, I've been in support of this. I know it's a stretch. I'm really going to be concerned about the development agreement and how that comes up, assuming that this passes. And I think there's going to be some good discussions over what that's going to contain.
You have anything you want to, where are you at, Andy?
You know, I still want this to go forward. I just have a lot of concerns based off of, there's a lot of very angry people at the idea of us doing this. So, I don't know, you know, and I'll say it again, and I'll always say it. I hear from 50 people who don't want it and 5 who do, and what is the population? Is there silence agreement or disagreement?
I gotta say this, though, Annie, every decision I make, there's angry people at me. So, I mean, when you're dealing with 24,000+ people, there's always gonna be somebody mad.
Right,
you know,
no,
and-
I totally understand that.
Did you, Bob, were you gonna, oh, I thought you had something that you wanted to
No.
add in. Okay,
No, you've heard my spiel, I mean,
all right.
I just didn't know if anybody had any different
I
kind of
didn't get,
feelings.
I really haven't got all that much extra stuff. I mean, I got a few emails, but, or a few emails, but, there's still a lot of people in support. It's kind of, could go both ways, and so I, you know, we just have to use the information we have and
Right.
try to make the best decision, I think.
Okay,
We're good?
yep.
Good. All right. Next, we have a resolution approving master facilities agreement, including Addendum 1 with Interstate Power and Light Company. Mr. McGregor.
This resolution approves a master services agreement with, it says Interstate Power,
Alliant.
it's Alliant Energy. So we have some city-owned poles in the city of Burlington. Most of them, a majority of them are owned by Alliant. There are several of them that are bent, I should say a couple of them. The corner on Division as it curves around the corner by the railroad is one that got hit. And there's also one on Flint Ridge Business Park. This agreement allows us to contract with Alliant Energy, and Addendum 1 talks specifically about those 2 poles to, for the time and materials, come in and replace those poles. We have some of the equipment, but they are much more efficient at it in setting telephone pole, or light poles rather. We have a couple of them that were removed from the roundabout. That we're going to, they're the exact same pole and light structure, so we'll just replace those 2, and that's what you see in Addendum 1. But the master services agreement allows us in the future to add an addendum to it to have Alliant Energy be able to help us out with certain city lighting that we maybe are out of our element in replacing, so.
You guys good?
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Seems logical.
A, consideration of a proposal to enter into a SUE revenue loan and disbursement agreement and a principal amount not to exceed $308,956.67. Mr. McGregor, back again.
This is an SRF planning and design loan for the Locust Basin. We had a previous P&D loan for the MASL sewer separation. In order to fulfill the contract, we needed more money, I guess, borrowed from SRF to be able to do that. So that's what you see for the 308, is the remainder to make up the balance for our contract with HR Green.
Sounds good. You guys good? Good. B is consideration of sale of property locally known as 1114 Linden Street, City of Burlington, with conditions. It's going to be a lovely home. Mr. Teslin, you got anything you want?
This will be a vacant lot that the neighbor's looking to purchase.
Blasted. We good? Okay, moving to discussion items. Dial Building nuisance abatements amnesty. Kelly Hall.
Hello,
Hello.
I'm Kelly Hall. I've seen you all on the internet. Pleased to be here in person. Heard a lot from you about the TIF. I'd like a SIF, settled in full. So have a few letters about nuisance abatement. This has gone on for years. Most of the letters say, we're only going to send you 1 letter. That's all you're going to get from us this year. There's been tens of thousands of dollars in what I consider to be kind of a usury at 2% monthly, which is 24% per month on nuisance abatements. I see you're doing a lot for other properties in the area in forms of the TIF, with Apollo School, and those types of things. I'm here and I live in the city of Burlington now. I'm hiring all the workers there at the halfway house, and I need all the money I can get for that project. It seems like everybody's gotten quite a bit of tax advantages, grants, that type of thing. So I'm asking the city to go ahead and give me amnesty on all of the nuisance abatements going all the way back on my tax bill. Any questions?
And how much is that?
Well, that math is pretty exceptional. If we all want to get out our calculators, it's about 2% per month. That is compounded over time. And then, of course, it's behind a year because of how the accounting works with the tax assessor and the city. So it's quite a bit, but I have all the accounting on it.
So what was the number that,
They're still billing.
okay, am I thinking of something? What's the $32,000 number? What's it?
Oh, well, that's all of the taxes, but only some of that are abated. And it got quite confusing because I had 5 parcel numbers, and they changed my parcel numbers. So, if anybody wants to help unravel that, I'd love to have any suggestions.
City manager.
Oh, yes.
This is really a policy question for you. We charge for services, so I guess most of the fees are as we do, for example, with mowing. When we bid those out and they charge us, we pass those charges on along with, what do you do, like
It's $200
Administrative fee.
in admin fees.
It's
each time?
$100 for the first one and $200 for subsequent ones.
Well, I
That
have,
was something that, from the council's perspective, a couple of years ago, the only framework I can give you on this, I don't know of any time where you've waived something like this, not that you can't.
they have.
But from a policy perspective, a couple of years ago, the council asked us to increase these fees because you're trying to be more aggressive about dealing with the recurring nuisances and
Right.
trying to create an incentive for people not to do this. However, you do have a request from a business owner asking you to, as part of her process of trying to do something with this facility, to waive these fees. That's really a policy decision from your
I've
part,
gotten
how you want
charged-
to approach it.
$200 every single time plus the fee. So it wasn't $100, it's been $200 each time. And, I've asked for accounting records on this from the city. I've gotten a few records, but for instance, they charged me in 2017 over $1,000 for boarding up the building, and I can't see where they did that, and I can't get anyone to answer the phone or tell me that.
We've had to spend some time down there.
Mowing the lawn, and it's
For a long
$200.
time.
Yeah, it's $200 every time, $255 to $300 every time you mow a portion of, which really basically, I'm not even sure if I own that or not. It's, Eric, I believe
You'd be
it's,
responsible for the
for
credit.
the, okay, well, maybe Alliant and everybody who pulled out my gas line could have, been responsible to notify me when they took out all my gas line there. So, it's kind of a catch-21 situation. So you want me to be responsible for mowing something when, Alliant pulled out all my gas line, and nobody notified me then, okay?
That's Alliance deal. This is.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
That's
It-
Alliance,
it
that's
heated-
Alliance property.
From what, no, actually,
they
I'm not
can-
even sure about that. I was told it heated half of the buildings in downtown,
Yeah,
but,
well, that's Alliance property, that's theirs to deal with, not ours.
Yeah.
There is a responsibility by property owners, whether they bought the building or have a tax certificate.
Sure.
We've had police down there numerous times that you've never been charged for. We've had young people in and out of there and old people in and out of there. We've had
Old
people
people?
squatting in there, and it's been a real nightmare for the community. It's not even safe for our police officers to go in there and our
Oh,
fire department.
actually-
Would you let me finish talking, please?
yeah, I suppose,
They,
sure.
when they have an obligation to protect and serve, they also have an obligation, the chief has an obligation to protect his officers as well. And it's an unsafe building for them to go in and out of because of the different holes and weak floors and that sort of thing. It is a responsibility of the property owner to make sure that the building is secure and that people stay out of there. So it's, we've tried on numerous occasions to secure the building.
When
And
would
then
you like
somebody
me
would-
to address
Somebody
you?
would break into it again. the very next day. You've put new windows in there, and people have
Sir?
already broken the windows out.
No, sir, they haven't. Which one would you like me to address first? Which statement?
I
Let me
know,
let me
I'm
let me
just- I'm
speak
just
now.
stating- I'm just stating my position in that I won't be supporting this. If you want to develop the building and you start developing the building, and we can see progress, we'll find ways to help you get that accomplished.
Thank you.
But as far as your request to do
I heard you the
waive
first
these,
time.
Abatements, I'm not gonna.
Yeah, I heard you the first time. So I'm going to address, I see that you have in your agenda Police Week. I don't know if this is Chief Beard, but I've actually spoken to him on the phone before. The only time I get phone calls over the years, and I've had the same numbers.
I just want to address, I don't want to address I don't want to open up those conversations. I just want to deal with the abatement, just with the request. I just want to deal just with the request.
Okay, I just want to, rebuttal what this gentleman says.
Well, I mean, this is in court, so I mean,
Sure,
we're not going to get into
yeah.
that.
But, this is the same guy that just said he would love to see somebody else succeed. Was it Apollo School, or was it the urban
We're
redevelopment?
talking about the Dial building.
Yeah, I
right
know.
now, so
You'd love to see this person succeed, this other person, but you want to tear me down.
I'm not interested in tearing you
Yeah.
down, I'm just
Okay, well, that's what
responding
it
to your
felt like.
request.
So, I'm putting a lot of my own money into it, and, since you're really hoping for somebody else's success, thank you for your support. Appreciate that. Go ahead.
He did say, if you're putting money into it and you're developing, we're glad to work with you to help you get it developed. That's exactly your words out of your mouth, right, Mr. Scott?
Exact words.
Yeah.
Great, thank you for your support.
We're good?
Anybody else?
You good? Thank you.
Thank you.
So do we bring it forward as a resolution, or are we just gonna drop it?
I didn't see anybody that had support on. Okay, I don't have a consensus, so we can't move forward on that.
Bob, if you're wanting to consider approving her request, you would have to it would have to come forward at a council meeting, a regular meeting. If there aren't one or two of you that would like to see that project go forward, or that request go forward, there isn't a reason to put it on an agenda.
Okay, number 2, TIF policy.
Ron Gillette, 812 Dunham, Burlington, Iowa.
Wait. Hold on.
This is for number 2 TIF policy. Are you,
Tax income and financing.
But
is he
you're-
doing this?
We're not having a public meeting right now. This is a work session.
We're doing a TIF policy.
Oh, then there'll be no open discuss, because I'm looking at discussion items.
Not tonight, sir.
But not
That'll be
tonight,
next week.
no.
Okay,
Next-
then, other than that, may I please talk to you about something?
Not tonight, sir. That's at the council meeting. This is our work session tonight. And you're not on the agenda.
But this
We'll have to
is
get you on the
serious.
agenda, but if you want to get put on the agenda, or if you want to wait till after our council meeting next week, after next week's meeting, at the end of it, then you can come up with whatever comments that you have.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. TIF policy, who's doing that?
Yes. Just have the same, the memo, kind of going over outline of what Fairfield has done for their TIF objectives and policies, some of the strategies, goals that they've incorporated into their policy, additional items contained in the Fairfield TIF and other policies from other cities, highlight application forms, consideration of different efficiencies or designs, housing needs, infrastructure expansion and needs, whether it's targeting infill or blight, brownfield or growth areas. They often talk about minimum investment or improvement levels that the developer is expending, talk about rebate terms that council may consider. They also have reviewing the TIF policy. Some evaluate that on an annual basis to make sure it continues to meet the needs of the community and the council goals, as well as a statement that the policy does not obligate the city to use TIF funds for any or all projects that meet the criteria. Ultimately, it's up to the city council. But just for reference, the Fairfield policy was included to give some direction on what other communities have done and provide some guidance or a framework for what could be considered.
So in terms of, from a staff perspective, as we tried to follow up with the request from council to have this as a discussion item, we tried to find, I mean, there were a few other policies that Eric had pulled up. I think the city of Marion, city of Johnston,
Yeah.
had much more in-depth policies than what Fairfield is. But they are also communities that have a lot more growth going on and a whole lot more activity that they're trying to coordinate. And I think they both have economic development departments that are actively managing a TIF program. And it doesn't quite make sense to look at a policy such as theirs. As just talking with Eric in regards to what kind of areas, if you were to consider a TIF policy on housing, what kind of areas do they see that make sense to have that discussion about? Typically, if a place is, if you're looking at a TIF program, and you kind of see it in Fairfield's policy, they have some general areas where they want to incentivize housing to get done in a way that it isn't naturally being done by the market. Whether that's for wanting to see incentivize more energy efficient housing units, which is one of their primary feeder categories that they have in there. Workforce housing is a category that they have listed and prioritized. They've chosen what kind of areas that they want to see occur. Another example, downtown blighted is an area that they've done. For us, as we look at what, from a staff perspective, what would make sense to consider, whether it makes sense to actually do or not, is really a policy perspective from you as a group. Your downtown area is one that could potentially be considered. Now, that would run counter to what you've done with tax abatement over time. So that kind of was one that we weren't really considering as one that you're looking at as a TIF policy that you're trying to accomplish. Infill housing is one of the categories that Fairfield had in theirs. We do have a couple of infill areas that aren't getting developed, and it would we could see the value of having that as a consideration, trying to get some of those infill areas developed. Then the other area, and the Fairfield policy identified a housing study that they'd had done, looking at the most recent housing study that we've had done by Gruen and Gruen, and looking at some of the categories for housing shortfalls that they've identified that aren't getting met by the market as it is.
Right.
And out of that, the areas that stand out is the 260,000 and below area. Really, even out of that's 180 to 260. I think some of the narratives in there talk about the lower priced housing, there is an adequate supply. Now, Councilmember Scott, you've been very forthcoming with the study from Mike Pearson that's talked about job growth hasn't matched what was in that study, in the Gruen and Gruen study. And I think that I would have to agree that I think that the estimates for new housing needs based off of job growth are probably higher than what they've shown. Out of that study, they talked about there being a need for about 140 units over the next 10 years in that 180 to 260,000 price range. But I think they're overestimating it. By how much, I don't know. They talked in that study about current housing needs of about 18,400 units for the region. They talked about there being 18,800 currently in existence, and a need to maintain the existing housing stock, given that we lose a number of units over a period of time. They talked about needing over the next decade about 900 units just to maintain the existing housing needs for our existing population. They were talking overall another 1,200 units for growth. I don't see that 1,200 growth necessarily being a need. If you think over another 900 units, and they're saying about 50 are being built a year, there may be a need for 200 to 400 more units for maintain a stable population over the next decade. How much do you need to hit? I don't know, because I think that some of the conversation that came up from the last meeting from maybe the mayor, I wasn't here, was maybe a specific number that goes into that. It would be less, if I were to say what the housing need is, I would think that it's less than what Gruen and Gruen has said, but what it is, I'm not really sure.
I
It
just
makes
thought
it,
maybe we can meet in the middle. That's what I was looking at. I thought we could, take two
Yeah.
numbers and and that would probably be close to what it actually is.
but that's really kind of, what do you want to see as a policy, if you want to see one? Are you looking to try to target a specific housing price range? Are you looking to not do anything at all? The one that makes, again, the one that makes the most sense to us from a staff perspective, there are some infill areas that aren't getting done.
Right.
Those make a lot of sense. When you talk about doing an expansion of housing, now you're, specifically the development that we're talking about on the south side, what's the housing shortfall that you're trying to address? How much of that are you willing to try to address? Is it,
But we got to do both. I mean, there's no getting around the expansion because some people, no matter how nice the house is, aren't gonna live in that infill on certain places. I mean, that's the reality of it. That's
Well-
why I'm even looking at that, or why I was originally looking at that. I'm just saying. I mean, I think there's gonna have to be both. We need to target infill, but we can't get away from expanding out as well. I mean.
Well, I'm not in favor of trying to put together a policy. I studied the law that allows all this, good Lord, but then I got the summary of what you can and can't do. The Fairfield thing, of course, I got a kick out of that. It gives you all this detail in there, but it goes on to say the bottom line, this is subject only to the approval of the city council. And I think that's what makes sense why you don't need a policy. The law is pretty well stipulates what you can and can't do. And I think as we address needs in our community, whether it's this council or 10 years from now, those needs are gonna vary and they ought to be addressed accordingly. And to me, to lock into a policy on something that's not that manageable to begin with, I think you're just making things more complicated than they should be. Just my opinion.
That was Wisdom speaking. How old are you, Monsignor?
Quiet, please.
Oh, yeah, my fault.
if,
But I hear you.
if you're gonna do it, and this is part of what he's speaking to, and if you look at Fairfields, and I don't know how well they're gonna keep up with this, but it talks about doing reviews of this and amending it over time.
Right.
If you're gonna have a policy in place such as this, you're gonna have to actively also be reviewing it and keeping up on it.
Right.
I've got to lean with what Bob said, though. If we don't need policy, let's try to not create any extra paperwork.
So then wouldn't basically anybody be able to come up?
I'd like the
And
number.
request it.
I'd like to put a number on it, and maybe a sunset date, but I'd like to put a number on it and address the need, call it done. I don't know what else you guys want to do.
I think it's fair to have some sort of a policy and have it reviewed. Yearly basis, every 2 years, because there does need to be some sort of guidelines for everyone. I
That's
just
what
don't
you
want.
got this for.
Well, yeah.
24 pages.
It's 24.
Good Lord, I mean, I don't know how you need any more information.
Right.
Well, does anybody else feel like we need more policy, or that we need?
Yeah, I
See on this?
don't, I'm not looking for Fairfield's answer. I'm looking for a direction that we're going to go. If urban sprawl is the answer for all of our development needs, then let's open up TIF to everybody there is and bring in all the new property we can to the area and fill it with housing. If our goal is to use infill development that is the most economical for for the community and build it to the standards that the original developments were built to and make it fit with an area, and that being impossible to be done without some kind of incentive, then let's offer that as an incentive in infill development. If we've got low to moderate income housing that we need in the community, then let's make TIF the target of that. But if we're not gonna do it that way, then let's just open it up and anybody can come in and ask for a TIF that wants it. And we can't base an earlier decision on the Gruen and Gruen study that says we're not getting these houses developed in this price points. Because the facts, if you get on GIS and you look at the developments that are most recently done, you'll find out that that's not true. That these houses are getting developed in these price points without TIF. 1419 Pawnee, 1413 Pawnee, 1418 Pawnee, 1400 Pawnee, 1443 through 1453. Now, those are condos, but all the first ones that I mentioned, the individual ones, are houses. If you go to Winchester and Cambridge, almost every house in that development is in that price point. So if you go to Diamond Ridge, there's one or two houses in that price point. If you go to the Lavender Lane development that Justin Myers is doing, there's two houses that have been built there, and there's more to be built that are in that price point. Mike Pearson's Deerfield, I know those are conjoined houses. Every one of them are under $238,000. They all fall into that price point. So we're getting houses built in that price point. So I don't know that TIF is the answer for urban sprawl and for those price points, because they're being built. People are recognizing, but that's the housing that we need, and that's the housing that's available, that they're addressing, those price points. And if you look at the other incentives that are available throughout the state, like the workforce housing monies that are available, and our own local tax abatements, I don't know that we need TIF at all right now. TIF should be something that's in our tool belt, that when the time comes and we've got no other development and we've got no other tool and we desperately need the housing, that's when we should use it.
I agree with you on that, on everything except for desperation. I just think it for a unique, special situation if it calls for it. But I understand what you're saying, and I think it is something that we shouldn't just use willy-nilly, obviously. But so where does that bring us to? Where are you at on policy, Tim?
I'm just bringing up those points that I don't want a 15-page policy. I just want to know the direction that we're going to take. If infill development, which has been a priority of every council I've ever sat on,
which it still is,
and we haven't done the best job in addressing it. If creating TIF is what would get that done, then I would be willing to look at that, because we've already proven with one development it can't be done any other way, or with some kind of a better incentive than what we're offering right now.
But you're saying you only want to look at TIF policy for infill only? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that the council needs to have some kind of direction on what it is, what that's going to be.
Why we're trying to
I
set
don't
the
know,
policy.
but that's one point that we need. If the majority of council wants urban sprawl and they want to develop on the periphery of the community, then that's what we should.
I don't think we want urban sprawl, but all right.
How much of the town are you gonna end up with a TIF area though, if you're looking at infill? Every little infill area, you're gonna have to set up a special TIF zone in order to qualify? Or you call it urban renewal and you're okay with urban renewal?
You have a couple of areas that you would say would make sense from an infill development perspective. Where are those, Eric?
Burlington. One at the end of Garden Lawn and Dale is a difficult site that's been out there for a while. I'd have to, we have some off West Avenue or different areas like that. Some of the old school sites with larger areas around them as well.
Yeah.
So
okay.
there aren't a tremendous amount of spots that would fall into this type of a category? Because you're not looking at a single lot, you're talking about an area that's gonna be a little bit
Right.
larger.
Right. Okay.
Well, I guess we're gonna have to, I guess we need to continue this discussion item on the TIF policy and see if we can narrow it down. And as far as direction, can you come back with some information on, and give us some, so we can take a look at the infill areas that you were saying were the targeted areas that may be a problem?
We could put a map together on some sites of what could be considered infill, I guess.
What I'm hearing from the council, at least from a consensus standpoint, the only area of consensus that I'm hearing is in regards to the possibility of looking at a TIF policy that was directed towards infill areas. That's the only thing I'm hearing enough support that it would make sense as a group to want to get behind in a published policy. Would that be fairly accurate?
That'd be accurate from my standpoint. Infill's an issue, it still is.
And I'm not
Okay.
necessarily saying that everybody agrees with that.
Yeah.
You're right, we don't.
It's just one of me.
I'm not seeing the majority. I wish I was, but,
Well, I don't mind looking at it. I mean,
I mean, if we're gonna bring
But
something
still-
forward, I wanna have it something that fits within where I'm seeing you
Let me ask
going.
the right question. Do you guys just want to dump this for now then? Is that,
No.
I do.
No.
I don't,
I think it's
this
a good idea.
doesn't work for me.
Well, no, this doesn't, but a very simple one that addresses one specific need for a period of time until we decide that need has been met, and then if needed, we can change the one specific need to, say, a lower range housing or urban sprawl. Right now, our need is infill.
We can do this without a policy.
I know, but it's for the people.
I'm with you, Bob.
Like, I
We're-
get that,
We're
but,
talking about the economic stability of our city and our area.
right,
And it's dynamic, it changes. Now granted, it hasn't been
Absolutely.
a big deal here, but and that's our obligation as a council to be looking at those situations and find ways to address those needs. TIF is just one tool. And the law very well spells out what you can and cannot do with it. And that to me is a policy that we're bound to. And while infill today might be the appropriate thing for us to be looking at, because it's a well-defined need, if in fact it is, 2 years down the road, we might have another development that's more along the lines of industrial development. I mean, and I guess you can have a policy, but I think you ought to change it about every 6
well,
months.
that's what I basically.
But what does it do?
That's what I said.
What does it accomplish?
It puts it out there as a great incentive. It makes it aware for people to do that specific thing.
Well, we can have, that's easy. We can have policy saying we agree that TIF could be applicable in different situations. End of policy.
And then we play favorites by saying yay or nay. That's what it looks like then, unfortunately. I know.
I don't know who
The
you're
laws,
talking
the
to.
laws
I
that
don't
you,
agree
the laws
with
that
that
you're
either.
talking about, Bob, can be changed by case law. And that's, if we don't have a direction or a policy, then when we approve one, we better be willing to approve the next one.
I think
And if we don't,
I think that's ridiculous.
I think
It
it's
might
fact.
be.
I mean,
I think it's fact. I tell you, if
You're
I were
playing
in that,
lawyer
if I
again.
were in that position, and I had a very similar project, and I come before council, and council says, no, we don't wanna do that now, then my next step would be taking it to court. And I know there's developers out there that would do the same thing. So if we're not, if we're gonna pick and choose winners and losers, then, and not have a policy, then move forward with it, go ahead.
This,
It may not happen in our lifetime on the council, but it'll happen.
this, this particular policy, though, like you said, comes down to the very end, or you, I guess
Yeah.
it's you. Says,
It's
it's up to the council.
Right.
You're ridiculous.
I still would like to,
So that's why I don't care for this policy.
Right.
yeah, and I agree with you on that.
I mean, if you want to have a, go ahead and have one, but I'm just saying, I hope we keep our eyes
Well,
open though and look at the
Yes,
need in our
but
community.
But it makes it blatantly clear for a certain aspect that we want to get done, instead of anybody, every single person coming up to us and saying, I want TIF for this project, and if it doesn't fit what we think it needs to, and we say no, the majority of everyone in the town will think we're playing favorites. That's just the way people think. I'm just saying it in that way. Not necessarily that we are playing favorites, but that is how it will appear.
I would just-
Unless we have some sort of,
Let's move forward with the discussion, and let's not let this thing die, we'll get it figured out. This is the work session, we're working it out. But bring us back some information on that, Eric. Let's see if we can address it again. We had this study done because apparently there was a problem, and there still is, so.
there certainly is. I wasn't able to buy a house.
Well, we're about to do a development agreement. If this action that we discussed earlier tonight passes, the next step will be making a development agreement. And that's gonna set policy.
I concur, and I think it's gotta be pretty restrictive.
We read, go ahead.
As you get into those comments, not having a lot of time frame to get it, and we don't have something back from Bob Jostens. We've asked for a document for that development agreement. But a couple of the things that would make sense for you to be thinking about if you're going to do a development agreement within the terms to make adjustments on what's been requested. The developer has asked for the TIF rebate, the 100% value of the rebate that's potential to be turned over for the full 10 years, and he wants to use 2 separate time clocks. That's one that was based off of the agreement down in Fort Madison. You certainly have the parameter if you're wanting to do this, but not wanting to allow for 2 separate time clocks to have a discussion about whether that's valid to do or not, or if you just want to have 1 time clock on there. The other one, that might be detrimental to the developer, and you probably want to have a conversation with them is if you're going to consider that. The other one that you could have a discussion about is, do you want to have wording in that development agreement that places limitations on what you're willing to give a rebate for? The developer has talked about the housing study and how it talked about the need for housing below that 260,000 price cap. Do you want to have a limitation in a development agreement that you will only provide a TIF rebate if 75% of the units are below that figure? Or do you want to say you will only give a TIF rebate for those units that do fall under that cap? Those are some conversations that you as a group need to be able to have and decide how you want to proceed with them.
And that comment right there is completely logical.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's the whole point of the
Right on.
development.
Now, that's not where we're at now, but if you're moving forward with it, those are the things that you should be thinking about for if you're going to consider it, and if you're looking at, are there things that could potentially be modified, those are the areas. But again, you probably need to talk with the developer as you're doing that. Is that gonna be something that is viable for what he's trying to do? And are you concerned with that or not too? But have an understanding of how does this impact both parties, both the city and the developer.
Yeah, and going back to the Apollo thing, if you're gonna have, I know it's a different type project, but he wants different times, different 10-year time periods. So how does that?
Well, the Apollo he's gonna be going under the tax abatement. So if you have the tax abatement, and we establish a district, and it's there for the next 10 years, he can make an application at any point for any phase of development that he does during that 10-year timeframe. It doesn't fall into that same type of a discussion.
It occurs to me that it's a whole big, it's one project. That's the way I look at it. And,
Yeah.
Anyway,
But it's the same way that when you own your own property and if you put an addition on your house and then 2 years later you build a garage, you go for 2 different tax abatements on those improvements. That's,
yeah, okay.
that-
All right.
and if you start a project and then you don't finish it,
Okay.
you've got one period.
Rethink that philosophy.
Okay, we're ready to move forward, guys? Number 3, downtown development.
Jesse Caston has been working with a couple of prospective developers for the purchase of a couple of properties in the downtown area, and I think this was kind of, well, I'll let you frame what you're trying to accomplish with making a presentation to the council.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, Jesse Caston, Terrace Real Estate. Yeah, so I talked to you briefly a month ago, I believe it was, a couple buildings that are under contract downtown. One of the concerns that they've kind of brought up or had is, parking and trying to figure out parking. So I know with Jim and Eric, Zach James, Jason Hutchison, we've all kind of looked at different parking options and just trying to come up with a scenario that helps. The company who has those buildings under contract right now is here. And so I also wanted them to talk a little bit about them, so you guys got familiar with what they do, their company, and ask any questions that you might have. So I don't know, do you have pictures, a map of like where the buildings are, just for reference for everybody? And I don't know if, Joe, Levi, I don't know if you guys just want to talk, whoever you want to have, talk a little bit about you guys and then.
Hello, I'm Levi Ritchie from Y&J Development, and this is Joe Ehrenberger. We're a team of 4 developers out of Davenport, and we've got the Blau and Sons and the Churchill building under contract. So basically, with that development, between the two, we're looking at roughly about 100 units of high-end lofts that we're looking to put in downtown. One of the issues that we always have is with the development in the downtown is lack of parking. So that's kind of why we're here, is to get the city's help with figuring out an actual parking structure or land or something that we can actually use for that. We try to have about at least 1 unit per space when we do most of these developments, with some additional on-street parking for whatever the commercial and whatever else we need for those tenants. So that's kind of what we're looking at. We'd like to get that figured out first before we move on with any further of our work on the development site. We have about 250 plus units in Davenport currently that we've developed over the last 4 or 5 years, so we're pretty familiar with downtown projects, historical remodels, and that's kind of what our wheelhouse is, and that's what we're looking to do here. So it'll be quite a bit of development in your downtown that should add to the whole surrounding area. So that's kind of what we're doing.
I was just going to say, Eric, can you bring up maybe the different parking that we had, and we could even point it out on here, of maybe, the immediate that we might be able to get on the street, and then in the city parking lot across the street, and then looking more longer term of whether it's purchasing the Burlington Northern Santa Fe lot. That's probably the ultimate goal, not only for this development, but for other development downtown or other parking downtown. And then, probably city-owned, turn around, rent the spaces back on a longer-term basis. Like I said, this would actually capture probably multiple developments, but it's been looked at that there could be on-street parking on Valley Street, and then there is space available in the city lot across, I think 22 stalls approximately, and then Valley Street right there adding. Those parking stalls on Valley Street would be the other direction. Obviously, the diagonals are wrong, but so the immediate part would be Valley Street and the city parking lot, And then, you know, if the city or somebody else was able to acquire the Burlington Northern lot, that's, you know, in addition to. So that's the ultimate goal, is to get the Burlington Northern lot. We just don't know where we stand on that, so.
Levi, is that enough to cause you to go forward with just this?
With the 147 spaces, are you talking?
No, I'm just talking about the Valley Street and the lot across.
Yeah, that's 147. No, he's talking about just the 65.
That previous slide to show it better.
Yeah, go back
Go
to the
back.
previous thing.
So you had talked about you have two separate buildings that you're looking to do. And I think when you had come in before, you talked about the Blau and Sons possibly moving forward first
How many spots is that on there? That's 50 to 100?
on the Burlington
Talking
Northern.
about the 40 and then the 22.
But the question was, if you did the 40 on the street and the 22 in the lot to the north of it, you get to 62. That might be a little shy of what you need to, in order to move forward on the Blau, but it's fairly close, isn't it?
No, we'd probably more like 120 spots. in
To do
total.
both.
He's saying for both.
Yeah, and I think what
We're
Jim.
wanting to do them kind of, you know, there will be one and then the other, but they'll be pretty close together would be the phasing of
Okay.
them. And so we'd really look to,
So what you're saying is we need that BNSF.
well, part of our agreement is, you know, we're buying both buildings, 170,000 square foot of property, and we'd be moving forward on, you know, both the developments simultaneously. One would get done first, then the other one, but we'd probably need a commitment somewhere down there of, you know, 120 spaces.
So as we talked about it, we presented, if we weren't able to get the BNSF site, we have the parking lot just off of Main Street to the east of there, as being a potential. That didn't sound like that was one that you were in favor of.
I mean, if we were able to get these ones and those locked down with the potential of moving those closer over a time frame, that might be enough to get our financing locked in to move forward on the whole thing.
Yeah, the key is not getting stuck where we have
Yeah.
the 62, and then all of a sudden, we don't have any for the Church Hill building, which is gonna be roughly
Because
65.
this would just barely, even if we did 120 spots, this would just barely get us done even, it would be uncomfortable even at that, but if we could do that, we'd probably potentially be looking at taking up more like 240 spots, but we could probably come in when we're here on site, figure out another 120 on our own.
Where are we at in the discussions with BNSF on that property?
You heard anything from Jason?
I talked to Jason last week, so trying to be proactive, did a broker opinion of value on what that land was and submitted it to Jason to submit to the railroad. He's kind of hit up them a couple times a week, and he had gotten responses there, but I don't know if they're passing it through. So as of today, I'm not sure exactly where we're at on that. That's level parking, so that's obviously, the easiest and the cheapest way to go, if we can get that accomplished. That 56 stalls, that's gonna be obviously a city lot that's available next year, or?
Well, you'd have to do something there. Our ability to do something on that lot is building a second level. And Jesse, I don't know, Mr. Howe, I'm sorry, other Jesse, I don't know if you'd worked any at all on even an estimate of cost on that?
Yeah, the estimate for the raised lot there, if you demolished the existing building and added the lot, was somewhere around 1.9 million.
Pretty expensive.
To do the BNSF lot was like $500,000 without purchasing the property, so.
So when we talked about the BNSF lot, if you think of about 500,000 and you're gonna have 100-some stalls in there, we typically we're renting just shy of $30 a stall a month. So you're looking at 36,000, is that right? I'm doing this not the way I should be doing that. About 36,000 annually, so you're not gonna quite cover your cost in a decade, but you're gonna come close to covering the cost of that. And I can see the justification to make that happen fairly easily.
Yeah.
The other one's gonna be a lot harder, and that's gonna, if we're not able to get the BNSF lot secured, is the council willing to commit to doing a project that might be close to $2 million? That's, you're talking then doing a TIF project to build that. Is that worth it? And I don't know if that, what the answer is on that for you all. That's one that you all have to come up with an answer if that's worth it for you to consider or not. The BNSF one, for us, the cost amount makes a lot of sense to try to get something done.
That's ideal for us too, from just location standpoint, for the two
For
developments
sure.
together.
Yeah.
But the other one makes me gulp, so. I mean, we can cover it, we can do it, we have the ability to do that, it's just, is that significant amount something that you see as something that you want to stand behind to help development occur in the downtown area?
We've had our eye on that lot for 20 years and making it a parking lot. It's a good reason to pursue it.
So what do we need here?
Well, first, is there a willingness, do you see a willingness to be actively pursuing the BNSF, and that makes sense as a viable thing to secure if we can, to try to make a project like this occur?
If you look at our comprehensive plan way back, it's in there. It's I think it's the most logical place in the downtown for expanding parking. And it's the most reasonable.
I would agree.
My answer is absolutely.
And that, to me, it made sense just in terms of you're not, over a period of time, you're gonna cover the majority of your costs regardless, even notwithstanding thinking about what you're doing for bringing two buildings that are underutilized back on the market.
Exactly.
The other one, I think, I wouldn't be surprised if you said you needed more time, if not saying that you're just absolutely against it, but they'll need to know as we move forward where you stand on that as a backup. So that's one of the things that you need to be thinking about. And if you need more information from them as developers, this would be a good time to bring it out, what kind of questions you'd have or what you would need to make you feel more comfortable.
Are you gonna need anything else from us other than our TIF, or our tax abatements, TIF, I didn't say TIF, tax abatement program that we have in the downtown and parking?
Not currently, but this is the biggest hurdle right here to really move forward and get into the actual numbers and the layouts and everything. Based on paper, everything's viable, but the biggest thing is this hurdle right here before it even goes forward. So I don't know at this time, but currently we don't.
So two quick things. I think, one, what we probably have to accomplish and what they need to know is that there is participation on the parking part, on helping get that figured out. So they're on a time frame, and that's part of the contract, which I mentioned last time I was in here, that there's gonna be participation in that, whether, it's a letter from Jim or something else. It would be, and I don't want to speak for them necessarily, but it would probably be 18 months or so before that would have to be delivered. But they would still need the vote of confidence or, however you would word that, but saying that on the participation for the city parking. And then the second thing I just want to mention, I mentioned it last time, is that, and you guys can tell me if this is different, but this is market rate and using the historic, but it's market rate.
Yes.
I would say based on the growth of the downtown right now, without this development, we would be looking at that for parking.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't know why we would want to delay pursuing BNSF and getting that done.
Think everybody feels the
I
same
agree
way?
with that, but that's not enough.
Well, no, that'll, if we were able
That'll
to
be
get the
enough for them.
BNSF land, we can meet their parking requirements between the BNSF land, the on-street parking, and
It'll barely meet them.
and
It's
the,
bare.
And we'll be filling up all the street
All right.
parking too. but-
Yeah.
and then
Well,
there's
you guys can worry about that later.
the other question's gonna be, where's your level of participation if we're not able to secure the BNSF? Because
That's questionable.
how well are you willing to look at the other ramp as a fail-safe to back up if we're not able to? Because that might end up ultimately being something that they need to have the viability to move forward in a time frame that they need to have to close on the buildings.
Yeah, we have to have something within, right around that 60 days.
And as you think about that part, again, this isn't something you have to have tonight, but even the Tama building coming online and the parking demands it's gonna have,
Right.
it'll change the needs for the spaces that are over on that other spot also.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're gonna, this isn't the only project that would benefit from a second level over there. It's just, is that worth, what's your stomach for cost? Again, how I'd look at, if you're looking to move forward with that, you can cover that through TIF financing, that we have the flexibility to make that happen. It's a matter of what do you see as a priority for trying to
What's your stomach?
make things happen in a downtown area.
Parking's gonna be huge as we move forward.
It's gonna
Parking's
be,
gonna be
it's gonna
huge.
be a significant issue. And again, why would you put money into something
Right
in the
on.
downtown area? You have some stranded infrastructure. We've got developments downtown that are coming online, but you have other facilities that are not utilized to their full potential, and it damages the community as a whole when you have that happen. There is a reason to consider it. It's just a matter of you feel that that's enough reason.
Right.
All right.
I'll consider it.
But we'll have to come up with a solution on that, and we'll have to be bringing forward something, what your level of willingness to commit to trying to find an answer of parking is.
Well, I know you can't speed up BNSF, probably, but
It would be
go
nice.
after it as hard as you can.
It would be nice if you could.
Do you guys have any questions for these guys, maybe on other developments that you might have in regards to this? I mean, I know that we're talking about parking in general, and I think that either way, it's something we need to really
answered my
take a
other
look
questions.
at.
I did see you forwarded to us those development pictures that they sent. That
Yeah,
looks-
you've done a
that
lot
looks-
of work.
That
on
looks
that.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah, this it fits exactly kind of what we do, so, and parking's always the biggest problem.
Oh, I hope you get it done. Hope you get it done.
We good?
Okay, we'll just revisit.
Okay.
It's
Thanks for
something
coming
that
down.
we'll have to bring back at a future council meeting. I think the questions, for the council is gonna be how much progress can be made on the, working with BNSF to try to get something accomplished, and then what's gonna be their stomach based off of where those discussions are for having a backup for you at the other site. Does that,
Yeah, we'll move forward and wait to hear from Jesse, and then we'll just maybe revisit, and if we don't hear anything from them in 3 or 4 weeks, to see what else.
oh, and keep prodding us too.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
Thanks.
Thanks,
We'll
gentlemen.
prob-
Thank you.
Burlington,
Well,
thank you.
will it be added as a item as option one? I mean, because I don't know if we're gonna have all the answers on BNSF before these guys have to make a decision. So I don't know if it's, that you guys have all the options available for parking. BNSF is still the number one, try to get that accomplished, but we might have to look at alternatives. I don't wanna say worst case scenario, because I don't, adding parking's not a worst case scenario, but as far as, money wise, I think that, you have to take a look at all of them and then figure out, just to make sure, because these guys have to have a letter of participation or something from you, so, if that makes sense. Any questions for me?
Appreciate you.
Thank you, Jesse.
We have a
The fire
dynamic-
department annual report.
We have a dynamic community. Things are-
Exactly.
I really was impressed with the buildings they've done in the Quad Cities so far.
Hey, don't you dip out before I talk how much you really like.
Oh, there goes half the audience. Well, don't take
Hey,
it, don't
we're
take
still
it
here.
personally.
We're still here for
Yeah.
you, chief. We're here for
It
you.
was supposed to be a 3-hour meeting. They were trying to talk me into doing this another time, and I thought, it's like halfway through this year already. But since we're not at the 3-hour mark, I can have a little extra time.
Are you gonna make us to go to 3 hours? Is that what you're saying, Matt?
I promised I would keep it short, so I will attempt to do that. So I'm gonna kind of just skip through the beginning part. This, if you read my monthly reports. A lot of this will be old news to you. There on page 4, I have the organization chart as of April 1st of this year. We had a couple people leave the very beginning of 2017, and we've already replaced them. So that's our current staffing that we have there. 43 people counting our administrative assistant. Our fire department years of service on the next page, just a few things to point out there. We have about 8 people with 25 years or more on the job. And of those, 5 of them are actually over the age of 55, eligible to retire, but hanging on, they love their job. So, and I'm glad to have them there. It's good to have that experience on the job. The 2-year group there, there's about 8 of them in there. We had a lot of retirements, and we also got the SAFER grant that year. So most of them are actually coming up on their 3rd year of service here. This is something I've had in the last couple of years packets. It's just again, to remind you of the area that we cover. The area in red there is our fire coverage area, and then in the blue adds in the EMS. So the red also includes the ambulance. The blue and the red together are all the ambulance area. So about 200 square miles that we cover with our ambulance, and I'm not including Illinois. It's hard to figure that out exactly what we cover over there. We're more of a mutual aid, but we do go over there quite a bit. Our calls for service in 2016, just a little bit over 4,800. Compared that to 2014, just under 4,200. So about a 600 call increase over the last 2 years.
The silver tsunami.
Yes, the silver tsunami. You remember that from last year. I would like to point out something. If you went back maybe 10 years and found a report and it said our calls for service, you might say, oh, back then you had 4,000 calls. But we were calculating our calls differently. We had a fire department and we had an ambulance department. We had ambulance numbers and we had fire numbers. Well, if you went on a car accident and you had a fire truck and you had an ambulance, the ambulance counted it and the fire truck counted it. If you had a shooting, stabbing, a lot of calls that we would call an engine company. If an engine showed up with a fire truck, it was a fire call and an ambulance call. Well, starting in 2012 or 2013, it doesn't matter how many vehicles show up there. If it's a call for service from dispatch, it's one call. So we could have 1 vehicle or 10 vehicles. It just counts as one. So if you would ever go back in time and you'd say, wow, there was a year, maybe 2013, where the calls actually dropped off. That's because we recalculated how we figured our calls. Down below there, the call types. The rescue, that includes the ambulance calls, also car accidents, river rescues, all kinds of different rescue calls, not just the ambulance. The service calls include illegal burns, stuff like that. Good intent, I had to look that up. I wasn't sure what all the good intent calls, but
What's good intent?
a lot of the good intent are we were dispatched and before we get there, we're disregarded. That's probably about half of those calls. The other part are legal burns. Somebody sees a fire, calls it in, we go there, nothing's wrong. That's just a good intent. Fire cause for 2016. The number 1 there is unintentional. That would equal accidental. So the majority of those, half of them are cooking fires. The other ones could be attributed to candles, carelessness, that kind of thing. The next most common, other than cause undetermined, is the failure of equipment or heat source. That's all kinds of different failure of equipment. And then intentional, you would think, oh, that's the arson fires. Well, it is the arson, but it's also the kid playing with matches. It's also the person that starts an outside fire on purpose and then it gets away from them. That counts as an intentional fire. The fire types there, our number 1 fire type is a building fire. And then cooking, vehicle, brush, and trash fill out the rest of those. The brush fires and the trash fires, those do not include illegal burns. So if we get called for somebody burning brush in their backyard and we go there and we put the fire out, we don't count that as a fire call. We count that as an illegal burn, and that's under another call type. This is just, a lot of people include these in reports just for fun. I ran the calls by days of the week to see what day are we the busiest. Of course, it's on the weekend. Saturday, Sunday, and then Tuesday. I'm not sure why Tuesday. Somebody said I should run it by the moon stage and see if if that actually is true or not. I'm not sure how to pull that report out of the data, but calls by time of day, from about noon to 6 PM, that's our busiest time of day. Midnight to 6 in the morning is our least busy time of the day. Still, however, 863 calls, that'd be about 3 calls per night after midnight on average. So mutual aid, I didn't do a comparison to years past, but we're again up on mutual aid, and that includes given and received aid. So that's us going somewhere or somebody coming into Burlington. It doesn't include calls with law enforcement. It doesn't include EMS. For the fire statistics, they only include other fire departments for mutual aid. So anybody else that you work with is not counted as mutual aid. So if we would put Superior Ambulance in there, the plant for their ambulance, and maybe Mediacom, you'd probably see another 10 or 15 calls added in there. Now, the picture down below is from a fire we had up on 8th Street. I included that. There's a good shot of some West Burlington guys in their ladder truck up. I forgot to say, if you want me to stop at any time and ask me some questions, go ahead. So, EMS stats for 2016, and I pulled these out of our software that we started last May, so I don't have the stats from January, February, March, and April, so this is only about 2/3 of the year, so keep that in mind on these numbers. But about 70% of our calls are advanced life support, they need a paramedic. The other 30% could be handled with an EMT. Most of those you don't know until you actually show up. But what I liked is the skills down below there. You'll see that we had 276 times that we did a 12 lead and transmitted that to the hospital. So if you remember, we got a grant last year, we bought some more 12 leads. So every ambulance actually has the capability of doing that. So that really helped us up our numbers. 937 times we did 4 lead EKGs. The 21 interosseous, I just included that because a lot of people don't know what interosseous is. I think I talked about that once before, but that's actually a drill that drills a needle into your bone. So most of the people are unconscious when we do that. Not always. If you can't get an IV and you need to give them medication, we do that. So 21 times in that 8-month period.
Wow.
1,297 just regular IVs.